Okay, we are holding on 33B1, the second line.
Oi.
So we're a little behind. I'm going, Charlie is here. Very good. Okay, we're up to 33B.
This is a Chazara.
Chazara from Charlie. So we're going one. Now I'm going to go a little faster today because I have a goal to hopefully get us to 35A. It's not likely to happen because this is real hard stuff, but I'll give it my best shot. We've got a little time. We might go a little overtime today. Okay, here it goes. Before we begin the Gemara, this is what you got to know. If you have a grape, inside the grape, there happens to be the juice of the grape. The real question is like this. Is the juice of the grape part of the grape? Mivla, that means it's part of the walls. It's part of the walls of the grape, or no? In fact, the grape is the grape, the juice is the juice, and the juice is merely contained, like in a container, contained within the grape. And the nafkamina would be, if the grape is tameh, if I say the juice is part of the grape, then the juice is tameh. But if I say that the juice is not part of it, it's really mutually exclusive. It's simply taking up, it's contained within the grape, but it's its own identity. Well, in that case, it's not tameh, and we'll see what the story is. The second thing is, for any food item to become tameh, it has to be a shia kebeya. It has to have a volume size of an egg. That means its ability for itself to become tameh, it needs to be the size of an egg, shia kebeya. At the same time, in order for it to convey, to be metame other things, it at the same time, at the point that it's being metame, at the point that it's being kaveya, it's conveying tumah, it too at that point has to also be the size of a beya. If it's not the size of a hen's egg, it has no power, even if itself is tameh, but it is shrunk down and it's below the size of tumah, of a shia kebeya, of the volume of an egg. It has no power to convey tumah, to be metama further. Okay, once you got this in your head, we can do the least the beginning Gemara. Again, I'm going to be moving a little quickly. But if I'm not making any sense, stop me. Okay, here we go. Second line. Yosef Rav Acha bar Avi Kamed Rav Chizda. Rav Acha bar Avi was sitting before Rav Chizda. Yosef Amar Mishmed Rav Yochanan, and he said in the name of Rav Yochanan, Anovim shenitmu, in the case of grapes that become tameh. So the grapes themselves became tameh because at that time the grapes, the cluster of grapes, equaled the size, the volume of an egg. Dorchan pachas mikabeya. If one presses out of them less than a shia kebeya, less than an egg's volume at a time, so you take only 3 small grapes and you squeeze them out, it turns out the yenon koshel in isachim, that the wine that gets squeezed out of it is in fact not tameh, is tar, so much so that it could even be used on the mizbeach, on the altar, for nichsei yayin, to put to the libations of wine. So you're going to ask me, that sounds ridiculous. The juice is inside the grape, and you're telling me the grape is tameh, so shouldn't the juice itself be tameh? Says the Gemara. Alma, therefore, Kisava, it turns out that Rabbi Yochanan holds, mashkin, the juice, mafkia pikide, is in fact merely contained within the grape. The grape's the grape, the juice is the juice, and they're both mutually exclusive. They both have their own identity. The juice is not really part of the grape. So when the grape is tameh, it is tameh, but the juice that is in it is not yet tameh. So when can the juice become tameh? Le'emas kam metameh, break the Gemara. So when does the juice acquire tumah? Zok the Gemara. L'chi sachiluhu, when the grapes are squeezed. We're on 32b2. When the grapes are squeezed, right? When the juice emerges, it becomes tamei by now touching the grapes. When the juice is squeezed out, as it's being squeezed out, it automatically touches the outside of the grape. Since the grape in fact is tamei, the juice that is now squeezed out of it, that leaves the container and then touches the outside of the container, i.e. the grape, becomes tamei. But since lechi sachiluhu less leishiura, but in our case, since when you squeezed it, you made sure to squeeze the volume of grapes that were less than a shear kebeya, were less than an egg's volume. There was only 2 or 3 small grapes, so they were less than together they were less than a hen's egg. So when you squeeze them, they were less. So we said anything less than a shear kebeya, anything less than a hen's volume, it cannot convey tumah. So even though the juice now comes out and is now touching the grapes, so they should become a tamo, but since the grapes do not have a volume of an egg, they have no power to convey tumah. So guess what? The juices remain tar because they were merely contained in the air, in the grapes and not part of the grapes. And when they came out, they only touched the grapes that in fact were less than a shear of a beya, were less than of egg's volume, so they had no power to convey tumah. So the grapes remain tahar, and they can even be used on the mizbeach for nesachim. Amazing. Why do you say that? Why does Rabbi Yochanan say less duchyin pachis mikabeya? You should have less than a shear of an egg. Let's go exactly kebeya nami, even if it equals exactly an egg. Because what happens when you squeeze a grape? The juice comes out. As you're squeezing the grape, what happens to the grapes? They automatically shrink in volume. So if you start with exactly 3-4 grapes that equal the size of an egg, but the moment you start squeezing them, automatically they become less than a volume of an egg, less than a shear kebeya, which means that the moment that the juice comes out, the grapes are no longer the size of a beya. So the truth of the matter is, you could start with a beya. Why does Rabbi Yochanan say you have to start with less than a beya? The Gemara says, Ditnan tom a mace. Somebody who's tom a mace, somebody who touched the corpse. So is a avatumov, a tom a mace. Sheshachat zeisim va'anovim, who squeezed olives or grapes. So the olives and the grapes are now rishon the tumah. Says the Gemara in Kosa that they are rishon kebeitza mechavenis taharim. But if when you squeeze them, they equaled exactly the size of an egg of a beya, shear kebeya, then the juices that come out are completely and utterly tar because they were the size of an egg. So they were capable of becoming tamei, right? When you're the size of an egg, they're capable of becoming tamei by the tumas mace. But the moment you squeeze them, they themselves became less than the size of an egg. So what came out of them, which is the juice, which is merely contained in them, when the juice touches them, the juice touches the grapes or the olives at the time when they're less than the shear of a beya. And therefore they cannot convey tumah to the wines, to the juice, and the juices could even be brought on the mizbeach. So, and for the Gemara, you're right. The truth is, you're right. Of course, you can start with a shear kebeya, with enough grapes that equal a beya, because the moment you start squeezing them, they get less. But hasam the ovad, in the case over there, we're talking about de facto, after the fact. If you happen to take a bunch of grapes that equaled exactly a beya and you squeeze them, so therefore they shrunk in size, the juice that came out is completely tar. But Rabbi Yochanan is talking about hacha lichatchila, the proper way, the way we want you to do it. The way we want you to do it is we want you to take a volume of grapes that's less than a beya. Why? Because if you start taking exactly the amount like a beya, what happens is you're going to end up taking a couple of more grapes already. If I'm taking that many grapes, I'll take more grapes. And you'll end up squeezing more than a shir kebeya, more than an egg's volume. So when you squeeze it, even though they got smaller, they'll still be the shear of an egg. So therefore, we're being careful. Therefore, we're being careful. And Rabbi Yochanan says the proper thing to do is to be as careful as possible. And let's do it less than a kebeya. And this is the same thing, by the way, about Pesach. As you know, we're supposed to eat the afikomen by chatzos, by midnight. The truth is, you're allowed to eat it until the morning. Same thing with Kriya Shema at night. You're supposed to say Kriya Shema at night by midnight. The truth is, you can say it all night. But we're always worried if I give you all the way to the thing, you're going to end up blowing it and going past the time. Same thing over here. If I let you do exactly the shir kebeya, you might end up taking more than the shir kebeya. So Zak the Gemara, Amalei Rav Chizda, so Rav Chizda said to Rav Acha bar Rav Avio, Man motzi le Rav Yochanan Rabbach. Who will listen to you and Rav Yochanan, your teacher? 1 minute. V'chi tumo shebehen laheichen olcha. 1 second. You said the grape is tamei. So where is the tamei? The juice. The juice is inside the grape, which means Alma Rav Chizda holds, Kasava Rav Chizda, Mashkin Mivla Belia, that the juice of the grape is not merely contained in the grape, but is its own identity, but is in fact absorbed into the flesh. What are you talking about? A grape's a grape. A grape and its juice together make a grape. It's not two separate things. And when the food, i.e. the grape, gets tamei, the juice that's in the grape also becomes tamei. So therefore, that's a different story. So Amalei, so Rav Achia bar Avi said to Rav Chizda, what, you don't hold that the juice is merely contained in the grape, that the grape is the grape and the juice is the juice, and they're mutually exclusive. But tonight we learned 33b3. Tom a mace, shishachat zeis and this was just learned. A tom a mace, somebody who touched the corpse, who's an avatoma, who then touched zeis and who touched olives and grapes, okay, who therefore became a rishon, mischavim kebeya tahirin, that if the grapes or the olives equal the amount that are being squeezed, equaled exactly a beya, a shia kebeya, the volume of an egg, the juice that comes out is tahar, is good. But that works out. That works out if you say that the juice of the grapes is mutually exclusive. It's merely contained. So therefore, just because the grapes are tamei, the juice does not start out tamei, they're tar. And when they're squeezed out, that's the only time that it can become tamei if they end up touching the grapes, if the grapes are equal to an egg's volume. But here, since you squeeze, automatically the grapes get smaller than an egg's volume. So when the juice comes out, as they're being squeezed, they touch something that's less than an egg's volume, and therefore they remain tar. But according to you, Rav Chizda, but if you say that in fact the juice is not a separate entity, but is absorbed into the fruit, and in fact is the grape, the grapes is the grape, and everything that's in it, then in that case, they're tamei. And how could you say tahar, that the tar, that they can be used on the they can be used on the mizbeach, on the altar? Amalei, it says Rav Chizda, by grapes that are not machshel mekabel tumah, that are not susceptible to mekabel tumah. Because what do we always say? We learn this by Rechanina Sagan Kahanim, that food items do not become susceptible to tumah until they're first wetted with one of the 7 liquids. So in this case, we have a bunch of dry grapes. Since we have a bunch of dry grapes, even though they're touched by an avatoma, it doesn't matter. Since they're dry, they're not susceptible to becoming tumah. So the aim is saying, so when do these grapes become susceptible to tumah? Easy. Actually, when you squeeze them, the juice that comes out of the grapes touches the grapes and makes the grapes susceptible to become tamei. But the moment you squeeze the grapes, what happens to the grapes? The grapes shrink in size so that they're now less than an egg's volume. So the time when they get wetted by the juice of their own grapes, they're getting wetted when their own volume is less than less than a shir kebeya, less than a volume of eggs. So number one, of course, they cannot be mitame. They cannot convey tumah to the liquids, but in fact, they themselves cannot become tameh. Because when they were wetted to become tameh, they were less than a volume of eggs. No problem. So it's up to Gemara if that's the case. And Rav Chizda says, because if you don't say that, then in fact the juices are part and parcel of the fruit, and they become tummy along with it. Haditanya, this we learned. We learned this back when Rabbi Akiva said to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, what is chametz of teruma? Back a couple of dafim ago, chametz of teruma, what is it similar to? And we said over there, l'trumas tusim v'anovim shenitma, berries and grapes of teruma that became tamei. And we said over there, she'ein loy bal loy heta achila, where the kohen neither has permission to eat it, v'loy heta hasaka, and has no permission to burn it. And we said because truma that becomes tumah is up to ba'achila, and it's also ba'ana, and it's also, it has to be burnt. But we said regarding truma, that when you burn it, you're allowed to have benefit, i.e., while you're burning it, you're allowed to take a frying pan and use it as fuel to cook up whatever your latkes. However, these things, tusim va'anovim, are obviously not flammable. They're liquids. They don't burn well. So therefore, they're not usable to burn. And the Chachamim also said you're not allowed to sprinkle them on fires to make a good smell, because you might end up coming to then drink them yourself. So therefore, there's no thing. So Frank the Gemara, what are you talking about? I could come up with a heter. I could come up with a permissive way. But we can come up with a way where a client should have permission to eat the juice. He can squeeze the anovim, the grapes, less than a volume of eggs of grapes. Squeeze it, and therefore the juice that comes out of it, since it's only contained in the grapes, it's only contained in the grapes. It's not part of the grapes. Therefore, they should be tar, and you'd be able to drink it. The fact that you say over here that you're not allowed to drink it is a proof that, in fact, that the juice is not simply contained in the grapes. It is, in fact, part and parcel of the grapes. And if the grapes are tamei, the juice is tamei. So therefore, when you squeeze it out, even though you make it smaller than a shir kebeya, smaller than an egg's volume, it doesn't matter. It started life as a tamei already. It's tamei is tamei. Of course, you can't use it. So you can't eat it, and you can't burn it, because, in fact, it doesn't burn. So this is proof, according to Rav Chizda, that, in fact, the juice of a grape is not a separate entity, is part of the grape itself. Amar Rava, so Rava says, no, this is what Rabbi Yochanan would say. Gezerah, this is merely this that we say. The truth is, the kohen could drink from, in the case of tomadika grapes, if you squeeze it and it's less than the size of an egg, the truth is the juice that come out is tahar, and the kohen me'ikar hadin could drink it. The reason why he can't is a gezerah derabbanan. Gezerah, it's a rabbinical decree. Gezerah dilma osi bo lidei takola, because you might come to transgress and go ahead and eat from it, because you're touching the grapes and you're squeezing it and all that. You might come to pop one of them into your mouth. Amalei Abaye, is that a fact? Really? Are we worried about someone is going to pop the food into his mouth? Well, Tanaba, we learned, remember what we said, when truma becomes tamei, you have to burn it, but when you burn it, you're allowed to have benefit from it by cooking something over the fire. This brisa says, Madlikim bepas ubishemen shel teruma shenitmes. You're allowed to fire up with bread of teruma or shemen of teruma or oil of teruma that became tamei. How could you touch the bread? Maybe he'll pop the bread into his mouth before it gets into when it gets nice and toasty on the fire. He'll pull it out and have himself a nice breakfast. Why? You see that we don't worry about it. So that can't be your answer. So what are you telling me, Rava? That Rav Chizah is merely saying it's that the truth is the Kohen could drink. It's only with the Rabbanan that he can't because we're worried about the takala. We see we're not worried. Amalei, Rava says to him, no. Pas zorik le beino eitzim. In fact, the case is the bread used for fuel. One must throw it among the firewood right away and get it dirty so it becomes disgusting to eat. Shemen shel teruma and the oil of teruma, ranu levi klei moish. You have to put it into a dirty vessel so that you will not come to touch it. We're on 33b4. So now the Gemara is going to go right into this whole conversation. And now we're off to another kind of thing. And that's what the next dot is all about. All right, Kufo. Madli can be passed b'shemen shel teruma. We're allowed to light with bread and oil of teruma shenitmes that became tomei. Abaya Oma Mishmei Dechizkiya V'Rova Oma V'Oma Debei Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Marto Oma Rav Huna. And Rabbi says in the name of the yeshiva Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Marto, said in the name of Rav Huna, Lo Yishanu, this that they said this Lo Yishan El B'Pas. They said this that you can throw in bread because it gets disgusting being thrown into the firewood. Avol Chite, but wheat kernels of truma that became tamei loy. You cannot kindle a fire with it because they're like popcorn. Shema Yomi Yudei Takola, because you might come to eat it because you throw them into the fire and they're popping and they get all good and you pop them into your mouth and they're good. No, even wheat kernels that became of truma that became tamei, you can kindle, you can throw it under the fire and you can cook over the fire. Why does Rabbi Yochanan allow us? It's like popcorn, right? It was 2,000 years ago's microwave, right? You're popping the kernels. And now we're on today's daf. The answer is, says Rav Ashi, Bishili Koso Umi also, because what they did to the kernels is first they boiled them, so they really made them real soft, and then they threw them into the fire. So when they were soft and they got thrown into the fire, they became extraordinarily disgusting. So that's what Rabbi Yochanan is talking about. When he takes the wheat kernels, you boil them up in water. Who wants popcorn that's all mushy? And then you throw it into the fire and it really becomes disgusting. And where do we see this Rav Ashi? Because what Rav Ovid Bar Acha said in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak, a story. Abishol Gabel Shabes Rabbi Yoya. Abishol was the kneader, the kneader of the dough in the house of Rabbi HaKadosh, Rabbi the prince. And the people of Rabbi's house brought him, heated him up in water with fire that was fueled by the wheat kernels of truma that became tamei. And with this water, he went ahead and kneaded dough that was kept in a state of tahara. And of course, they asked him, Amai, how were you allowed to use those kernels of wheat? You might have come to pop them into your mouth. He said, you might come to a transgression through popping it into your mouth. That's because I first had them boiled, and then they were thrown into the fire. They were disgusting. It wasn't the problem. Now, once again, Rabbi Yochanan said that the juice of the grape is separate from the grape. It's merely contained in the grape, and if you squeeze the grape less than a shia kebeya, the juice remains tar, and it can even be brought on the mizbeach. The Gemara is now going to go into a very intricate and long baraisa that tangentially, at the end of it, we're going to roll back to what we started today with Rabbi Yochanan. So have patience. And again, stop me if it's not clear, please. Abaya bar Ovin, Rabbi Chananya bar Ovin, Tanu Terumas Beirabo. Abaya ben Ovin and his brother Chanina ben Ovin were studying the Seftis Terumais in the yeshiva of Rabbo. So Rabbi Bar Masna encountered them and he asked them, what are they learning in Masechtas Trumas in the yeshiva? Amalei, my koshalach. They saw that he was obviously bothered by something in Masechtas Tshuva. Amaluhu, Tanan. It says, now I'm going to tell you this. It's in the ninth parak in Masechtas Terumos, the seventh Mishnah. Just remember that. This is the seventh, because we're going to find out that the Mishnahs before this seem to be repeating what's later on said in the seventh. Okay? Tanan, in the seventh Mishnah, in the ninth parak in Masechtas Terumos, it says, Shesile Terumos, Shenitnu Ushisolam, regarding teruma plants that you first reaped and you disattached it from the ground, which then made it royal to become truma. Remember yesterday we said something that's mechubal copper that's attached to the ground cannot be truma. Only something that is removed from the ground can then become truma. So he did the right thing. He cut it. He removed it from the ground. He made it truma. And after he made it truma, it became tomei. So you know what he did? He went ahead and he replanted the whole plant. And the plant took root. The replanted plant took root. So the truth of the matter is, it's a brand new plant. Zakti Gemara Tahirim Militame, because it's a brand new plant. In fact, the tumah falls off. In fact, what it says, like it doesn't say the tumah falls off. It says it's tar with regard to generating tumah to other things. Tahirim Militame. It's tahirim from being mitama other things, which seems to mean that it itself, even though it's been replanted and now rerooted, it itself remains tameh. So and the Gemara says the isurim mela'echol, and it's also to eat because it's still tameh. But frank the Gemara v'chimeyachad the Torah milatame. But if you're telling me this plant that was tameh, which then meant it should have been able to be mitama all the things, when it's replanted, it now cannot be mitama all the things. It what do you call it? It no longer can generate tumah. What do you call it to other things? In that case, amay asur miliyachol. Why is the kohen also to eat? The only reason when you replanted it and you went ahead, you replanted it and it rerooted. It became a new plant. It lost its tumah. It lost its tumah because it's a brand new plant, which means that it should have also lost. It should have lost its tameh completely, not simply its ability to be mitameh, to convey, but in fact it should have been tameh to lose it completely. If they're not tameh, the kohen should be allowed to eat them. Amolei. So Abaye and Rabbi Chanina bar Rabban answered, Hachi Omer Rabba. This is what Rabba said. My Yisurin Lizorim. It means that in fact non-kahanim cannot eat it. That means it retains its shame teruma. The plant retains its name of teruma, even though you replanted it, so it's a brand new plant, and it lost its tumah completely. It cannot be metame, and itself is tahar, but nonetheless, it still retains. Let's call this rabbinically. It still retains rabbinically its shame teruma. Because Malim B'Kodesh Ve'Meridin, we go up in holiness and we do not go down. Since it once had the name of Teruma, it stays with the name of Teruma, at least rabbinically, and the Kohen can eat it, but because it has the name Teruma, that means a Levi in Yisrael cannot eat it. So pray the Gemara, my Kamash Malon. So what are you saying the Mishnah is coming to teach us? Are you telling me that Gedule Teruma, that the new growths of a Teruma plant is considered as teruma, that in other words, you replanted the plant and obviously it grew some more. Okay, so you're coming to tell me that the new growths of teruma are themselves teruma, tanina, but we already learned that in the fourth Mishnah, in the ninth parak of Temura, which says, Gedule teruma, the new growths of teruma are themselves teruma. This is again biblically because this is rabbinically because biblically, once you replant it, it loses, it's a brand new plant. It's not only not Tameh, it's not even Teruma. But Midrabana, what do you call it? It remains Truma, and anything that grows from it becomes also Teruma. V'chi tema gedule gedulin. And if you're going to say that our mission is talking about growths that derive not from the original plant, but from the new growths, because two things happen. When you replant something, two things happen. Either the original seed disintegrates, or like an onion, if you take an onion out of the ground and you take the bulb and you replant the bulb of the onion, the replanted onion bulb does not disintegrate. It itself grows, but it also produces new bulbs, which will create new onion plants besides it. So this is what the Gemara is saying over there. If you want to talk about the growths that come from the new growths, and you're coming to tell us a plant whose seeds do not perish when it's planted, i.e., like an onion. The growth that comes from the new growth is also considered, and now we're on 34A2, is also considered like the original growth, and therefore the original growth is considered to be Truma Midrabanan. Guess what? The new growth, since it's a direct offshoot of the original growth, which is still extant, it's still here because the seed did not perish, so that it becomes, it's also Truma, Zakti Gemara, Hanami Taninan. We also learned that in the 6th Mishnah there in the 9th parak of Teruma, because it says over there, Tevel, what is Tevel? Remember again, there are stages to food. When the food is first cut, you're allowed to eat from the food what's called Achilas Arai, snack food, as long as it's still in the unprocessed position. It still has the shaft, it's not been smoothed out, it's not been piled up. But once you've done that, i.e. known as miruach, you've smoothed it out, you've cleaned it up, now the produce moves up to the level of tevel. Tevel means it's ready to be eaten as long as teruma is first taken. At the point when it becomes tevel, you're no longer allowed to eat it achilas arai. You're no longer allowed to eat it as a snack food. Until you take off teruma, it's completely asur. Once you take off teruma triggers that now the remaining food, the shirayim, like we learned yesterday, the shirayim become mutter to all Jews, to everybody to eat. So, in the case of tevel, where the answer is where you go ahead and you replant something from tevel, the halach is, and new things grow from the replanted tevel, the din is gudulosa mutarin. Its new growth is permissible to eat as an achilas arai, as a snack food, because it's considered to be back again, not processed. What are we talking about? This applies only in a plant where the seed disintegrates, where the original seed that was replanted disintegrates. So the new growth is considered to be its own growth, not an offshoot of the existing growth. It's a new growth. In such a case, we say it's a completely new growth and it's considered not processed and you're allowed to eat it as a snack food. It's not yet tevel. But in the case of a plant whose seed did not perish, like an onion, even the growths that grow from the new growths. So you had the original, it grew things, and those new things grew other things. So the grandchild of the original growth, because the original growth is still here, the seed of the original growth isn't still in existence, right? They're all considered usher, they're all considered like the original thing. So if the original thing is like tevel, they're all considered tevel. Well, if madach tevel, it's a kal v'chomer. If madach tevel, then certainly teruma. Obviously, tevel is a lower level than teruma, right? Because the truth of the matter is, teruma, the Rabbanan said, whether the seed is in existence, whether the seed is not in existence, the original thing still has a name, teruma, because truma is a much holier thing. So if I say this by tevel, that if the seed exists, then everything that grows out of it still has the same shem tevel, and you cannot even eat it as an achilas harai. There's certainly the same thing as regard to truma, that only the kohen can eat it and nobody else can eat it. Right? So the Mishnah is talking in case of truma that we're replanting is not teaching the law of a non-kohen. It's teaching the law of a kohen, because if it's tumah, then everything else that was grown from it should remain tumah as well. So Zakti Gemara, Ishtiku, Abai and Rav Chanina bar Abba were quiet. He said, "You're right. How does the kohen come to eat this?" Where did you hear anything about this? He said, this is what Rav Sheshes said. My Yisurim, when it said before, truma plants that were picked, and you made them truma, and then they became tameh, and you replanted it, tahirim milatame, they're tahar, they cannot be metama other things. However, Yisurim milaechel, they're also from eating. So now what does that mean? When it said my Yisurim, they're also to eat, it actually means Yisurim lekahanim. It means even though the plants, in fact, are no longer tameh, because they cannot convey tameh. If they cannot convey tameh, it means that they themselves are not tameh. Nonetheless, they retain the name teruma, and they become also to the kohen. Not because they are tameh, because if they cannot be mitameh, if they cannot convey tameh, that means that they themselves are not tameh. So why is it also to the kohen? Because they became invalid through inattention. Hesach hadas, with your thoughts going flying off. Because this is the rule regarding holy stuff. You have to pay attention to them. When you make something holy, you have a job to be mishmar toy trumasi, to watch my truma. What does that mean? Watch to make sure they don't become tameh. If your mind all of a sudden goes flying off and you want to find out what the Orlando Magic did at the beginning of the NBA season, and you take your mind off the truma, right? You take your mind off the truma, or in this case, I'm sorry, the Miami Heat. I apologize. What do you call it? It automatically falls into an uncertain. It falls into an uncertain position because I took my mind off of it. Maybe something tameh touched this truma. So now we have an uncertainty. Maybe it is truma, maybe it's not truma. So that's called hesach hadas. But now, as soon as these plants became tameh, we could assume that the kohen, as soon as the plants, the original plants that he made truma, became tameh, you could assume the kohen took his mind off of it. So even before it was replanted, even though it was replanted, we have no idea what took place over here. Because the kohen for sure ceased guarding them from any additional tumas. And if that's the case, that's why the kohen can't eat it. So it's up to Gemara. That's good, according to one that says, hesech hadas, inattention, is posel lagufave. What does it do? It makes the gavra, the essence, become no good. It's a psul. It becomes an invalidation in the etzem guf itself. So in its hesach hadat, when I create this uncertainty, it means this plant is now uncertain. It's no good. It itself is good. Shapir, that's very good. That even though you go ahead and replant it, which makes it in fact tahar, im kozed, the Rabbanim will come ahead and would say you still have hesach hadas, and the fact of the matter is, it itself is invalid, regardless of whether it's tamei or tar. It's invalid because of hesach hadas. You can't eat it. But if somebody says that hesach hadas is actually a psul tamei, then in fact it's because possibly it became tamei, possibly it did not. Then what are you going to say? Because we just said before that even a plant that became tamei, if I replant it, what happens? the tumah falls away, right? But that's what we said before, right? We said over there, Shasile Turumas, Shanitmu, Vishasala, and I replanted it. Tahira Militame. It becomes tar from the tumah. So the tumah falls away. Well, if the tumah falls away, I don't got any problem over here. The client should be perfectly capable of eating it. So it's up to Gemara. So then why does our Mishnah ask the client from eating these plants? Elamai, it seems to be, this is only going according to the Madhyama that says it's not about tumah tar, it's about the thing itself. The moment you have hesach hadas, the thing itself becomes invalid. But according to the one that it has to do with tumah, possible tumah, there's no possible tumah here. So Zakti Gemara, the itmar hesach hadas regarding the invalidation of inattention. Rabbi Yochanan Amar psul tumah habe. What it does is create an uncertainty of tumah, and that's why you can't deal with it. Which means if you can answer up the uncertainty, I would be able to have it. Rav Shimon ben Lakish Shama psula guf have. No, the invalidation of eschadas is in the thing itself, in the truma itself, which means even if I find out that it's completely tar, or even if I replant it, it's got nothing to do with it, it's invalid. Rabbi Yochanan Amar psul tamei have. Rabbi Yochanan says it's only a psul. Sheim Yava Elio Vitarena, because if Elio Hanavi should come and say that this truma is tar, he says, I know what it is. Shaman Lord, we would listen to Elio Hanavi, 34a3. Okay, we just turned the page. Rab Shimon ben Lakish psul aguf have. Rish Lakish says that in fact it's a psul within the truma itself. Sheim Yavi Elio Vitarena, and if Elio Hanavi should come and tell us, no, it's not tamei, it's tar, it's good. Ain't Sherman Lloyd. We're not going to listen to Elio Hanavi. We're going to tell them it's all very nice that you say it's coming. Tough noogies, hefzech hadas, parcels, the thing. Only by us. Only by us. Elio Hanavi can come. We tell him, sorry. That's it. Ace Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. So Rabbi Yochanan challenges Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Rabbi Yishmael ben Oisha, Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroika. Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroika, says, Lul cotton havia ben kevish lemizbeach. The mizbeach achitzaim, the copper mizbeach that was in the courtyard, the big mizbeach. There was the mizbeach, and there was this big ramp like this. Okay, on the side of the ramp, they made a small cavity. They built it into the floor between the mizbeach and the ramp. And the Gemara says, Shisham b'marova yishol kevis, on the west side of the kevis. On the left side of the ramp. They made a cavity. Why did they make this cavity? Because there the Kahanim would throw invalid bird chatas. Now this doesn't mean exactly what it says. This is what it means. It wasn't invalid, because if we knew they were invalid, bird chatas, you would burn them. Elamai, and if you knew that they were good, they would have to go up on the Mizbeach. So in fact, they were uncertain. Somehow something happened to make these chatos eyes fall into an uncertain situation. We don't know if they're tamei or tar, we don't know, whatever it is. So we throw it over there underneath the cavity between the ramp and the altar, and then usivua tsurasan, and then we wait for their appearance to change by being left overnight. And obviously, when they turn gray, as it is, the yoitz in the base is strife. And then, of course, they're no good. Then you can take them to the place of burning in the corner of the azara, the corner of the courtyard. Now, what happened to these chatasayis? How did they get to this uncertain area? The answer is hesach hadas, inattention. If you're going to tell me that inattention, hesach hadas, is a question of uncertain tumah, is it tumah yatar? That's why you have to throw it into the cavity. Because what happens if, in fact, they're not tamei, they're really tar, then what has to be? They have to go up on the mizbeach, right? You're not allowed to burn something that's actually been hegdish, that's been made holy, and is supposed to go on the mizbeach. You're not allowed to burn it, just simply. So what do you have to do? Because Shema Yovi Eliyahu Yitareda, because maybe Eliyahu will come and tell us that in fact it is tar and it's a perfectly valid offering and it should go on the Mizbeah. So what do? We throw it on the side and we let nature take its course automatically, and overnight the behemoths become gray, And when they become gray, therefore it all falls apart. What do you call it? Then you can burn it. But if you say Hesach Hadas creates a psul, it makes it invalid within the thing itself. It's not tied to tumah, the uncertainty of tumah tara. It itself is no good anymore. It's invalid. In the why do I got to wait to change of appearance? I don't need to do that. I could simply take it and burn it right away. It's already invalid. It's not about time because we learned Zeh, this is the rules, and now we're on 34b1. We're on Amid Bays on the other page. Call Pesulais Begufai, any offering that becomes puzzle invalid within itself. Okay, the answer is Yisref Miyad. You have to burn immediately, except for Bidam Ubiba Olin. In the case of an offering of a carbon whose invalidation came because of the blood, what happened? You shechted it correctly. You did the next avodah and you makabel, you gathered it in the blood. And as you were doing the third avodah of halicha, of carrying the blood to the mizbeach, what happened was you tripped, the kohen tripped and spilled the blood. So now the behemoth will never be allowed to be eaten. However, the shechting, the sacrifice itself, was good. Right? The slaughtering was good. There was nothing wrong with the meat that was slaughtered. So there we say the meat itself is still good. Right? Tuvara and Sabaran, its appearance must first change. Give me 1 second. I got to just shut this off. Got it. Okay, so in that case, since the meat is still good, that's the one case where you have to put it on the side and wait for it to change. The same thing is with the owner. If the carbon was brought, but the owner became tameh, so he cannot eat, right? It's the same thing as apply, but everything else was done correctly. You let the meat get putrid overnight. To varan tzurah and then you can throw it to the fire. Now, if Hesach Hadas in intention is in the thing itself, right? Then the previous discussed brisa, it should have been right away burnt. So why do we say that the chatas ha'oif actually goes into a cavity, right? It should have been burnt right away, not the next day when it turned gray. From here you see that Rabbi Yishmael ben Yochanan ben Roika obviously holds that Hesach Hadas has to do with the tumah and tahara. So it's a kasha on Reish Lakish who says Hesach Hadas is a psul begufay, is a psul, an invalidation of the thing itself, and not simply a problem of uncertainty of tumah and tahara. So says Reish Lakish, Amalei. So Reish Lakish said to Rabbi Yochanan, Hi Tana debei Rabba Barabu Udiyam. This Tana, Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Roike, is the Tana who was taught in the yeshiva of Rabba ben Avua, who said, Afilu pigul toin ibitzura. What's pigul again? Pigul is when the kohen is shechting, is bringing the carbon, and he has in mind a machshevet zoris, a bad thought. He says like this, I know that this carbon is supposed to be eaten for a day and a night, the day of the sacrifice and the night. Well, I'm having in mind to eat this carbon an extra day and an extra night. He has at a time. So we say it's no good and it's got to be burnt and that's it. But this Mandiyama says, even though pugel becomes no good right away, toin ibit surah, I still require it because of its kedusha, because of its holiness. I want its appearance to change until it's clear that it's no good. So therefore, the invalidation has nothing to do. In other words, the change of appearance might have to do simply because of holiness, according to this Mandiyama. Anything holy, even though it might be invalid immediately, right? In kol zeh, we want you, when it comes to kabbanis, we want you to wait until it changes colors so that nobody should have any questions what's going on here. So Eisvei, Rabbi Yochanan again challenges Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan says like this: Nikma oishen nifsal habasa. If the meat of a carbon of an offering becomes tameh or becomes invalidated. Now I don't know what those words mean at this moment in time. Shenifsal habasa, that became invalidated. Obviously, the Gemara is going to jump all over that. Or the third thing, sheyotze chutz l'kalayim, went out beyond the curtains. That means the behemoth, after it was shechted for some reason, did not stay in the Azara, did not stay in the courtyard, but for some reason was taken outside the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash, which is a psul. Rabbi Eliezer says Yizraik. Nonetheless, the kohen should still throw the offering's blood, since it was shechted correctly. And now only after it was slaughtered did it become tamah, or it became puzzled with something, or it went outside the curtains of the courtyard. Since it began okay, keep going and throw the blood. At the very least, it will be hurtza, it won't be a waste. Rabbi Yeshua Omer lo yizrak, do not throw the blood. Umayda Rabbi Yeshua, she'im zarak, that if you do throw the blood, hurtza, after the fact, the offering is considered post facto acceptance. Because, to remind everybody, the tzitz, the golden band that was worn by the kohen, that started with Aronica, that said Kadosh Lashem, holy to Hashem, went ahead and its rule was, it said that if a carbon was brought bituma with tomei, the tzitz went ahead and was maratza, cleaned it up. The power of the tzitz magically was to clean up tuma of kabbanis that were brought and say that they're still good. My nipsel now goes back to before. Nitma itame or nipsel b'habasa. What is nipsel? Lav. There's only one thing it could possibly be. Behesach hadas, in intention. If you God's fine, if you say bishlev pesule tomehavi, in intention, it creates an uncertainty regarding tumor or not tumor. That's good that Rabbi Eliezer says you can throw the blood in. Rabbi Yeshua says de facto you can throw the blood because the tzitz, the golden band, will come and clean it up because the tzitz affects acceptance where things were tamei. It could turn tamei things into tar with regard to acceptance on the Mizbeach. But if you say hesach hadas, and intention creates a psul in the thing itself, having nothing to do with tumah and tahara, amai hurts the tzitz. The tzitz doesn't work on that. If the etzem thing is no good, right? If the etzem thing is no good because of hesach hadas, it's invalidated. Period, and that's it. So it's a question on Reish Lakish. How could they allow the blood to be thrown? And for the Reish Lakish, I'm going to learn it up completely different. My nifsal, what does it mean, nifsal? Nifsal b'tful yoim. If you will remember, we learned this before, if somebody was tumah for 7 days, and then he was toivel on the 7th day, he becomes a tful yoim. I toivel today. He has to wait until Harav Shemesh, until the end of this 7th day, to the night of the 8th, and at that point, he's allowed to eat teruma. But kachim, he's still not allowed to eat until the next morning because he still has to bring his mechusa kippurim. He still hasn't brought his kabbanis, which are brought on the morning of the 8th. So truma at night can be eaten when you after Harav Shemesh on a Tvul Yom. Now, also, what is a Tvul Yom? A Tvul Yom, if it touches Truma between that period of when he was toivel in the mikvah until when he immersed himself in the mikvah, until the nighttime, until Harav Shemesh, if he touches Truma, the Truma becomes a Shlishi L'Tumah. It becomes puzzled. In other words, the Truma becomes the Truma that he touches will become Tameh, but will not be able to be Mitameh. It no longer could be, it's not strong enough because there's nothing lower than a Shlishi. Right? Shlishi, the Truma, everything stops. It's Tameh, but has no more power to convey Truma further. Right? So it's up to Gemara. In that case, since that's merely a form of Tumah, of Tavul Yom is a form of Tumah if it touches Truma, or it touches something else, the tzitz could affect acceptance. So Frank Rabbi Yochanan, that's not an answer. That's the same thing. You just said, Nitma oishin nipsal apasa. That's part of Nitma. Tomei. What's the difference? A Rishon or a Sheni, or something that became a Shlishi? Says Reish Lakish, Trey Gabone Tomei. It's two distinct sorts of Tumah. One Tumah is a Rishon and a Sheni, which means it is Tumah, and it can convey Tumah. A Shalishi cannot convey Tumah. Okay, so something about a Vaita, Kisolik Rovin, when Rovin left Bubble to go to Eretz Yisrael. Charlie, we're going to try to get to the Mishnah. We're trying.
I know. I have to go. I have another meeting, but I'll
No problem.
catch up myself.
Right. I'm getting to the Mishnah. I'm going to give shir on the Mishnah on Lamed Hay, and we're going to go to Lamed Hay on Mid Beis. Lamed Hay on Mid Beis, there are 2 dots about 15 lines from the bottom. Okay, that's where I'm going. I'm going up to Lamed Hay on Mid Beis for Shabbos. Okay?
Whoa.
But anyways, back to this. You see it? Lamed Hay on Mid Beis for Shabbos. You'll see there's 2 dots towards the bottom. That's where I'm headed to. Okay, so Zafti Gemara, Kisolik Robin. Have a great Shabbos. Great Shabbos. Kisolik Robin, when Robin left Babel to go to Eretz Yisrael, Amar L'Shmate Kamei to Rabbi Yirmiyah, he repeated what Rav Sheshes said to Rabbi Yirmiyah. Va'amar, Rabbi Yirmiyah said, Bagovle Tipshoy, these silly, these foolish Babylonians. Mishum de Yosef Ba'ar de Chashucha, since they're living in a dark land. Bavel, Iraq is a lowland. They have a lot of wetlands. So it's considered a dark land. They say it's murky teaching, silly teachings. Did they not hear what Rav Shimon ben Lakish said in the name of Rav Oishia, which sheds light upon the mission that deals with Tomei plants of Truma? For Rav Shimon ben Lakish said in the name of Rav Oishia, regarding the water of Sukkot. If you all remember that on Sukkot we have something called Nisuch HaMayim, the water libations. We celebrate the water. We thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the rain. So we take water and we pour it on the Mizbeach. That water needs to become holy. Hi, Jerry. What do you call it? That water needs to become holy. So how does it work? So concerning water that we will mekadesh, the water, and then it became Tomei. Before, obviously, you threw it on the Mizbeach as Nisuch HaMayim, the water libations. We do Hashaka. It's called Hashaka. Hashika and Ba'achagav Kedisha. You first do Hashaka, and then you go ahead and make it holy. What do you do? What's Hashaka? Hashaka is you take the water that became Tomei, and you touch the water, as it were. You plant the water into a kosher mikvah. So the water now becomes part and parcel of the kosher mikvah. So it gets consumed in the kosher mikvah. That's hashaka. If you ever look at a mikvah, if you ever go to the mikvah, you'll see there's a pipe between the bar of where the original rainwater is and the water. That's hashaka, the connection. Shaka means connection, the pipe connected. So the water touches the edge of the mikvah. It combines with the mikvah to be mitaher, to become pure, and then you can take out that water again and go ahead and be mekadesh it and make it holy to use as nisuch hamayim, the water libations on Sukkot. Hikdisha v'achakakishikan, but if you first made it holy and only afterwards you did hashaka, you planted the water back into the mikvah, you planted the water back into the kosher mikvah. So the Gemara Tamei, and it remains Tomei. Mechti. So the Gemara says, I don't understand this. Zeriya Ninu. In both cases, the water is undergoing planting in the mikvah. You're planting the Tomei water into the kosher water of the mikvah, right? Which should make it tar. Mali hashkina v'achakakidisha, mali akdisha v'achakakashikan. What's the difference to me if I do that first, I shaka first, and then I make it holy, or I make it holy and then I plant it into the water? Either way, the water in the mikvah should render it tahar. So what's going on? Alma, Rabbi Ishi is clearly saying, Ein zeriyo lehegdish. There's no such thing as planting the water in the mikvah is not effective to remove tumah that is now already holy. That's already kodesh. That's kodesh. The only way you could remove, the only way it works is where the water is plain water, that you take it from Tomei and you put it together, plant it into the water that makes it tahar, and then, okay, now you can make it holy. Hachinami, in the case of our case, of replanting teruma, ein zeriya l'teruma, let's say the same thing, that planting in the ground is not effective from removing tumah from teruma, because here it first was teruma, and then it became tumah, and now you're planting it in the ground. Let's say that it does not have the power to take off the tumah, just like over here by the water. If you make it holy first, and then you want to plant it into the water, the tumah is not taken off the water, right? You guys see the connection? If the water was tumah and you planted it into the thing, and you did it after you made the water holy, we say no good. Since it's holy, it doesn't work. That should be the same with the plants. I took off the plant. I made it truma. It became tumah. I wanted to get out of it, so I replanted it. Why should that work? Just like by the water, once it's holy, even if I replant it back in, I put it back together in the water, I put it back into the ground. What's the difference? At the end of the day, the tumah shouldn't fall off. So therefore, with regard to the kohen consuming them, the replanted plants remain with their tumah. And this is the reason why the kohen cannot eat it, because they're still tumah. It's very good. Yosef Rabdimi, the Kamalela Hashemat, the Rabdimi was sitting and repeating this, that the chumrah regarding the stringency regarding the water that we want to use for Nisa Chamayim on Sukkot, regarding the water we want to use for the water libations on Sukkot, that if it became holy first, we cannot remove its tumah. With Ashaka, Amalei Abaya, Hedesha Bikeli Kama, did Rabbi mean only in the case where when one made the water holy, he did it in a vessel. He took a klei ashares, he took a sanctified keli from the base of English, and he gathered up the water, thereby making the water holy. Since the water is now holy, b'kedushas haguf, with physical sanctification, because the klei ashares is physically sanctified, kedushas haguf. So now the water that's now contained in it became kedusha saguf, so it's a high level of kedusha. So now we say, I'm so sorry. Once you have this kind of high level of kedusha, you can't use ashaka or no avo bepeh like malo. But if he was simply mekadosh the water with his mouth, he said, "Oh, this water is kodesh to be used on the mizbeach on sukkahs for nisach hamayim for the water libations." So he simply gave it with bepeh. He simply gave it kedushas domim. Monetary sanctity. It wasn't yet made physical sanctity. Kedushas haguf. Maybe over there where it's only monetary sanctity, the Chazal did not go ahead and geyser. And they said when it only has monetary sanctity, you can, if it becomes tameh, you could use ashaka to take off the tumah and it will become tahar. Or maybe even with the mouth, even though he only made it kedushas domim, only monetary holiness, sanctity, even there they said no, once you do that, that's enough of holiness that if that's what happened, it became tameh, putting it into the water doesn't work. 34b3. Okay, let me know when you guys want me to stop, because I'm heading for the Mishnah on the next stomach. Catching us up. Keep going. Jerry, we're okay? You still didn't have to start the meeting. Okay. Amalei, so Rabdimi said, Zuloi Shemati. I actually never heard anything about this. What's the halacha when it's done with the mouse, and therefore only takes on kedushas domim, monetary sanctity? Whether even that's strong enough to say that you can't take off the tumah that falls on it through ashaka or not. Maybe you could. But I did hear something similar to it. The Amar Abavu, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Anovim shenitmu, grapes that became tomei, darcha v'achaka kedishin. You first press them, and then afterward, you first press them, and only afterwards do you mekadesh, do you make the juice holy. Tahirim, then the juice is holy. You'll notice that over here it says by Rabbi Yochanan, darcha, you first press them. It doesn't say press less than a shear kebeya. It doesn't say over here press less than a volume of an egg, like we started. So right here it says darka v'achada kedishon. If you press it, and then after the juice came out, after you pressed it, you then were mekadesh. You made the juice holy. Tahirim, the juice is tar, and it can be used as nisul chayayin, as wine libations on the mizbeach. Okay. However, hikdishon, if you were mekadesh, the grapes. You made the grapes holy. And after that, you squeeze them, Tameim, they're Tamei. Because the Rabbanan came along and made a chumrah, a stringency on grapes that were Mekadesh and said that the juice in them, even though normally we would say that they're contained in the grape and they're not part of the grape, they're two separate things. But in this case, when the grapes were Mekadesh, the grapes were sanctified, we say all of the grapes were sanctified, even the juice that was contained within it. So Zakravdini, but grapes only become Kodesh with the mouth. How do you make grapes Kodesh? You say these grapes shall be holy. And the Rebbe and the Chazal came and made a stringency. So you see that regarding Kodshim, whether you do it in a Klei HaShares, whether you do it in a sanctified vessel, or you Mekadesh, you make something holy with your mouth. Either way, there's a stringency that if once it becomes holy, you cannot remove the tumah, the contamination. Rabbi Yosef, absolutely not. Rabbi Dimi, that's no right. Anovim Kamrit, you're talking about grapes? Here, Hachaba Anovim Shel Truma. Well, what was Rabbi Yochanan dealing with? Not with grapes of Kodshim, not with holy grapes, but grapes of Teruma. The Kiddush Peh, because the oral Kedusha, when you sanctify it orally, the Dayu, the Kedusha is Kli Dayu. That is just like being Mekadesh and making it sanctified in a sanctified vessel. Because the way that you sanctify Teruma always is, in fact, with your mouth. You say, this portion of my produce becomes Teruma. You actually have to say it. So your mouth, in the case of Truma, is the only way you can make Truma. So over there, the mouth creates Kedushas HaGuf, physical sanctification, not simply monetary sanctification. Teruma is physical sanctification by there. But in the case regarding the water of Sukkis, of that we want to use that water for Nisachamayim, for water libations, which do require being made holy in a vessel. Eventually you have, even if you do it with your mouth, even if you mekadesh the water with your mouth, which means it got Kedushas Dom and monetary sanctification, eventually you have to bring the water over to the Mizbeach. How do you bring the water over to the Mizbeach? With a Klei Shares. The moment the water goes into the Klei Shares, it's elevated from monetary sanctification to physical sanctification. So in that case of the festival waters, which of course eventually, automatically, the water eventually ends up in a sanctified vessel, right? Which means that the water takes on physical sanctification. The rabbis did not make a stringency regarding when the water was first sanctified orally. They said when the water was first sanctified orally, it got Kedushas Dom, monetary sanctification. There, even if it's Tameh, you still can bring the water to the mikvah water and do Ashaka, touch the water, the Tameh water to the tar water, and it will become tar. But the moment it gets transported in a Klei HaShares, in a sanctified vessel, the water then goes up a level to Kedushas HaGuf, to physical sanctification. And at that point, it can no longer lose its tameh if it becomes tameh. Now the Gemara learns from over here. The Gemara before said, "Anovim shnit darkon a squeeze v'achika kadishin." So the question is, darkon, if one first squeezed them, afilu tuva, does that mean you can squeeze as many grapes as you want, and the juice will be tahar? The juice will be pure. But does Rabbi Yochanan say that? What are you talking about? We started the daf today. Grapes that become tovei, darchan pachas mikabeya. You squeeze less than a sheer kabeya, less than the volume of an egg. Because if it's the volume of an egg, then it has the capabilities of conveying tumah. So when the juice comes out, you will get tumah by touching the grapes. So Elamai do less than squeeze enough grapes that are less than the size of an egg, a volume of an egg. So what's going on over here? I've got a contradiction, a stira between these words of Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yochanan over here. So I'll give you a simple answer. Maybe over here, too, Rabbi Yochanan means to say that you dar, when he says darken, he means squeeze less than an egg's volume of grapes. So that when the juice comes out, even if it touches the grapes, they won't become tamei, they'll remain tahar because the grapes are less than an egg's volume, and so they themselves are not tamei, and though they themselves cannot convey tumah. The BJC, no. The hole somewhere over there where Rabbi Yochanan says you should squeeze less than a shikibeh, less than a volume of an egg. Also, the nogulay berishon. You're talking about where the person this grape hadn't become tamei because a rishon touched it. So when it rishon touched the grape, it became a sheni. The sheni could then make the juice that comes out of it into a shalishi. And there's such a thing as a shalishi l'tumah by teruma. By teruma, you can go down to a third. The havile inu sheni, because the grapes themselves will become a second level tumah. And we're now on 34b4. And what happens when it becomes a sheni? It's perfectly capable of making a shalishi for teruma. Since if it's an egg volume, and if the liquids that touched it, the liquids themselves would become tamei to a third level tamei, because a truma could become tamei to a third level. So therefore, you have to be careful, and you have to use you have to squeeze less than an egg's volume of grapes. So this way, it no longer can convey tumah. But in this case of Rabbi Yochanan, where he said it's okay, he seems to say you can squeeze more than a volume of an egg. The gavur b'sheni, where the grapes became tummy from a sheni. So the sheni touches the grapes. The second level touches the grapes become a third level. So when the third level grape touches the juice becomes a fourth level. But there's no such thing as a fourth level tumah. Tumah by truma stops at the third level. So in this case, you don't have to worry. Even if the grapes are more than a shia kebeya, are more than a volume of an egg, of an egg, it doesn't matter, because the grapes are only a shlishi l'tumah, and a shlishi l'tumah l'gabe truma cannot create a fourth level, since it was so. Therefore, the juice, even if it touches the grapes, remain tar because there's no such thing as a fourth level. Now we go back. The Gemara goes further. Rabbi Yomi before said that the reason that the tamei plants of truma, even though they replanted, they're forbidden to eat because of the chumrah that was put on it. If you remember, he said before that they were put on it. We learned it up just like the water. If you remember, he said over there, just like the water. Even though if it was already holy, it was already mekadosh. If you replant it into the water, it doesn't work. So too, even if you replant the Talmudic truma plants, the tumah doesn't fall off the same way, and the kohen cannot eat it. That's why. And now we have other people say different things. Amarava, Nami Tanina. The pasuk says, "V'nosan alav mayim chayim al keli." Talk about the paraduma. If somebody becomes tamei with tumas meis from touching a corpse, on the seventh day, on the third day and the seventh day, he has to be sprinkled with the ash of the paraduma, the mad cow, that was combined together with water. The pasuk says like this: "V'nosan olav," and you shall place upon the ashes living water el keli, into a vessel, which seems to say that the water must come living into the vessel. That means you have to take the vessel that has the ashes, the clay ashes that has the ashes, and you have to take it directly from the source, directly from the spring. You have to take the water directly from the spring into the vessel. But the problem is the pasuk also says b'nosan, he shall place. Place means alma delusion, that means the water was deep. But it also means attached. In other words, b'nosan means I have to put the water in, which means I have to put the water in, which means I have to take the water from the spring and physically put the water in. But the second half of the pasuk seems to say I'm supposed to take the water directly from the source. So what's going on? So now we're on Lamed Hey on we're just getting to the mission. Elo Malo, we're talking about the Brisa stuff is not discussing. And it's the Brisa we're talking about. Rashi says, but a stringency, a chumrah that was imposed by the Rabbanan on the water, which says that the vessel must be filled, the sanctified vessel that has the ashes must be filled directly from the spring, directly from the source. That means minat Torah. Yeah, we're good. Okay. Yeah, no problem. Oh, you can't see me. There we go.
I'm done.
I'm no good.
Our meeting is starting.
Okay, we're getting to the Jerry. We're getting to the Mishnah. Okay, right here. Okay,
Fine.
Take a look. You're good. Good. Have a great Shabbos. Okay. Elamalo, the point is over here. Elamalo, what he called the stringency, which is that minat Torah, you could take it yourself and put it into the vessel, but minat Torah, midrabanan, you have to take it directly from the spring. Hachanami malo, over here regarding Tuma, the truma that became Tomei, that was replanted, Chazal made a chumrah that it does not become fully tar even when planted in the ground. Amar Rav Shimi bar Ashi, he learns it a little different. Somebody who had the skin, skin became the mitzayra, got the skin disease, and so he was also tumbled for 7 days. He immerses himself, and when he comes out, immediately on the 7th day, he's allowed to partake in Ma'aseh Sheni. He's allowed to eat Ma'aseh Sheni in the second type in Jerusalem. Heavy is Shimshoi Oichel B'Truma. Once Harav Shemesh, when the sun goes down, he's allowed to eat Teruma. Teruma he's allowed to eat Teruma. V'Kachim Loi, but he's not allowed to eat Kachim. He's not allowed to eat from the meat of the offerings because he still has to wait for the morning of the 8th when he's Mechusar Kippurim, when he has to bring his missing offerings. So, Frei the Gemara, why can't he eat Kachim? Tar, he's tar. He went to the mikvah. He completed his 7 days. Elamalo, there is a stringency that exists regarding kachim that impulse that he's tar. He still has to wait till the morning of the 8th until he brings the kabbanis, until he brings his offerings, and that's minat Torah. Hachanami mali over here too. Midrabanan, rabbinically, we're going to make a stringency and say even though since it was already truma, even though you replanted it. Because it was truma and it became tamei, it does not become tar back just because you planted it. We also learned in a brisa vehabasa and the meat. This is the meat of a shlomim, and it says over there vehabit, which means it means if you're tamei, you cannot eat the meat. The question is, why does it say vehabasa? And the meat. It just should have said vibasa and meat. What's the extra the? The rabbis is eitzim ulavana to include the wood that is used on the mizbeach, the wood that is used on the mizbeach to light up the altar, and the levana, the frankincense that is used with the ketores that is burned, the incense that's burned. That even though they're not food. Since they're not food, they're either wood or spices. They're not food. They normally could not become tamei. We still say they're holy enough that they'll be subject to the tamei of foods. But the fact is, how could they be subject to the tamei of food? They're not food. They're inedible. Elamala. And what is it that the Rabbanim made a stringency upon kachim that say even inedible items are treated as food with regard to Tumah, even the eitzim ulavana, even the wood and the frankincense. Hachanami malo over here too, with regard to truma, which became tomei, which you replanted to get rid of it. In kol zeh, rabbinically, we're putting a stringency and we're saying it does not become fully Torah upon being replanted. Great, Jeffrey, we did it.